First, to follow up on the big story Joe and Mika covered a lot yesterday morning, that report from McClatchy that says investigators on the House Intel Committee, Senate Intel Committee, and Justice Department are looking into the Trump campaign's digital operations, specifically whether the program, overseen by Jared Kushner, helped guide Russia's voter targeting and fake news attacks on Hillary Clinton in 2016. Did the campaign point Russian cyber operatives and bots to specific voting districts in specific states? One source familiar with the DOJ's probe told McClatchy they probably doubt the Russians would have known which areas to target on their own. For their report, McClatchy spoke to a former Pentagon official who just left the Department of Defense in January after serving as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia and Ukraine and Eurasia. And that senior official said, quote, "There appears to have been significant cooperation between Russia's online propaganda machine and individuals in the United States who were knowledgeable about where to target the disinformation." Last night, Rachel Maddow spoke with that former senior Pentagon official, Michael Carpenter, and he explained why Russia may have needed people on U.S. soil.
There was probably some degree of tailored messaging, in fact, down to the very precinct level, targeting swing voters in certain Midwestern states. In order to do that, the Russian intelligence services, A, don't possess the internal capacity to be able to do that on their own in a very sophisticated way, but B, it is their MO, and I've seen this in a number of other countries, to reach out and try to use political operatives in the United States, in this case, to help with both the message, both the content, but also where to target it. We know that essentially Russian intelligence cutouts for the GRU, the Russian Military Intelligence Service, like the Guccifer 2.0 persona, which was a GRU agent, reached out to U.S. persons, both inside the Trump inner circle, but also to a political operative in Florida in order to elicit information and also to share information. It is inconceivable to me that the Russian apparatus, knowing how they operate, would not have reached out to individuals in the U.S., maybe connected to the Trump campaign or maybe outside of it, in order to glean more information on how to target this information. It's just not credible for me to believe that they ran this from the GRU headquarters in Moscow. That doesn't make any sense.
Again, that's Michael Carpenter, former senior Pentagon official, just left in January. Rick Tyler, we want to underline and make sure we point out that there is no link made yet. Absolutely no link made between this, but it is something they're looking into, and we hear someone like Michael Carpenter, who was in the department a few months ago, speak that strongly about it. It certainly wants to make you dig deeper.
Well, two things. One, in this whole Russia investigation, we hear the ratchet continues to click. With every revelation, it clicks, and then there's a new set of language, a new set of talking points. This part of the ratchet has not clicked yet. But if in fact it's true, there's no way that the Russians would be able to target to specific precincts with specific messages. I mean, this is what the Hillary Clinton campaign would have been doing counter to that to win those states in the swing states of Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio. And it's just not, I just don't think it's plausible if it's true that they could have done it without outside help. Now, they may have not, as was reported, may not have been directly from the Trump campaign, but they would have needed expertise.
You know, the other thing, Heidi, the level of sophistication in many of these campaigns, especially at the presidential level, is astounding. Targeting voters down to a single block where they live, what their habits are, what they like, what they dislike. And it's always been a wonderment, sort of a wonderment, that the Russians were able to so skillfully hone in on specific areas of this country, specific wards and precincts.
You know, I just coincidentally ran into a top Clinton official who served on the campaign yesterday at Union Station, and she said, you know, it was about this time a year ago when we started to raise flags to you all in the media. She wasn't trying to shame me, but she said about some of this targeting and the bots and the specificity of it. She said, however, never in our wildest dreams did we think that the Trump officials, that there was a potential there that people associated with the Trump campaign could actually be directing them. But now that some of this is coming out, like in the emails, they're just, even the Clinton people are shocked at how what these conversations have evolved and what the level of talks may have been. Because remember, we're not there yet, like Rick says. But we know, for example, that Stone had at least some contact with Julian Assange. We know that over Twitter, he had some contact and bragged about it with Guccifer 2.0. We're only at the beginning of figuring out what the level of that is, and like Rick says, it's really important not to prejudge this because the ratchet may not click, but there's some disturbing signs there.
I was speaking to a communications director of one of the major candidates who was in there fairly towards the end and said that every time in a debate his candidate would go after Trump, the bot, they would just all kick in and they would just trace it back and it would come from various German places. It was just so clear. The other thing that's interesting is Jared Kushner, who got this incredible credit for being a digital whiz and making this happen. And I grew up in that world. I spent 20 years in the ad business and then had to start to learn the digital world and the targeting world. And I wasn't that clever at it. And here's a guy who spent his entire life, or 10, 12 years of his life as a real estate scion, and then became a digital genius. And by his own admission, orchestrating this. I remember at the time going, where'd that come from?
But Donnie, to your point, it's and I think this can't be overemphasized. We place a lot of emphasis on digital, the targeting.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a message to target them with, it's worthless. So that point, you got to have the targeting, but you also have to have the right messages. And these messages seem to be, if they're right, voter suppression. Now, if that's true, then you really do have a case where the Russian influence may have turned the outcome of the campaign.
Now, again, we don't know, there's no connection yet, but we want to just say that the Senate Intel Committee looking into this, the House Intel Committee, and also the Justice Department looking into a possible connection between this data gathering group and Russian fake news like that Pizzagate story, for example.